Hello, my name is Aaron Mustin, and I did my research paper over the public perception of body-worn cameras by police officers. For the purposes of this research paper, a body-worn camera is any video recording device that is worn by an officer during the fulfillment of his duties, such as during a traffic stop or during the execution of a warrant. Body-worn cameras can be worn on a uniform, or there also exists a version that are able to be fitted to a pair of glasses. Body-worn cameras are a relatively new technology, but have already had a major impact on the law enforcement community. About 5 or 10 years ago, they weren't very common, but today most agencies already have them. 95% of law enforcement agencies have either implemented or plan to implement body-worn cameras for their officers, according to a study in 2017. The need for this type of recording device became very apparent after a series of high-profile incidents in 2014 and 2015 in which an officer-involved shooting became national news. These officers were not wearing a camera, and as such, their statements came under scrutiny. The people that they were up against in these incidences were usually unarmed, and so it became very difficult for us to know exactly what happened, and this made national news for quite a while. The purpose of the study is to confirm that the public perception of body-worn cameras is either positive, negative, or indifferent. It is to gauge support for legislation funding the implementation of body-worn cameras, such as for agencies to be able to buy the cameras themselves, and then to actually implement them and train their officers in how to use them. And it is also going to test the public position of government intervention and legislation concerning the use of these cameras, such as, does the public want the government to mandate that all officers have to wear these? Do they want the government to mandate that cameras can be used during certain situations, but not in other situations? It's just going to test that kind of position. The target population of this survey was limited to Texas residents and those who were 18 years of age or older. Prior research on the effectiveness of body-worn cameras has already been done. These studies have shown conflicting views of it. One in Rialto, California, showed that they can have a positive influence on the community. They followed 54 officers, and they saw a significant drop in complaints against that department during this time. They went from 0.7 complaints per 1,000 encounters to 0.07 complaints per 1,000 encounters. That was in 2014. In 2017, a Washington, D.C. study followed 2,224 officers over a 7-month period. Half were equipped with body-worn cameras, while the other half were not equipped. They were considered a control group, and no statistical significant difference was found between the two groups at the end of the 7-month period. And that was in 2017. Why there was a difference between the two, we're not entirely sure. The cameras may have an effect, or they may not. They would require more studies in order to prove it one way or the other. But what we do know is that the public is generally very positive towards these devices. A 2017 study regarding the public perception of body-worn cameras found that 87.1% believe cameras would improve the officer's behavior, 79.4% believe they would improve the citizens' behavior, 77.6% believe they would improve police legitimacy, 88.5% believe they would aid in the collection of evidence, 11.4% believe that they were a violation of citizens' right to privacy, and 7.2% believe that they were an invasion of an officer's right to privacy. For the survey, for this study, there were 7 hypotheses. The first 3 are pretty well intertwined within each other. If one is true, the other 2 usually have to be false. The first is that the public believes that body-worn cameras will reduce instances of excessive use of force and false accusations. Excessive use of force being obviously on the officer side, and false accusations being on the civilian side, where they falsely accuse an officer of wrongdoing, even though they didn't. It's generally a retaliation tactic used against police. The second is that the public believes that body-worn cameras will increase instances of excessive use of force, false accusations. The third is that the public believes there will be no impact on these types of instances. The fourth is that the public is more supportive of body-worn cameras than opposed to them. The fifth is that the public does not feel that there are adverse effects due to using body-worn cameras. Sixth is that income plays a role in one's views in terms of mandating the use of body-worn cameras. Seventh is that age will affect how one perceives the effectiveness of body-worn cameras. And the eighth and final one is that age will affect one's support for the intervention of government to mandate the use of body-worn cameras. Okay, for this research paper, an online survey was used. Again, participants were limited to 18 years of age or older and to Texas residents. At the end of the survey, which lasted about a week and a half, 2 weeks, a total of 50 responses were collected and analyzed. All these responses were collected completely at random, but a lack of diversity should be noted. 96% of participants were male, 88% were white, 82% were Christian, and 64% were 55 years of age or older. In future studies, a more evenly distributed sample should probably be sought out. Again, this just happened completely by random, but it's not a good sample of the state of Texas. Here is the complete list of control variables for the study. It should also be noted that most participants earned around $100,000 or more, and that most had a bachelor's degree or greater. A small number had law enforcement experience. All but 2 were U.S. citizens, and again, all were residents of the state of Texas. Okay, one of the things we looked at was income versus law enforcement agents requiring body-worn cameras. It shows that the results showed that it doesn't really have that much of an effect. It's generally supportive that law enforcement agencies should require their officers have these cameras across the board, even with those who made $100,000 or more, which was the greatest number of people. Out of 24, only 3 disagreed with this, and 5 remained neutral. Okay, results for age versus body-worn cameras preventing excessive force showed that, again, it's generally pretty well supported that the public believes that these cameras will prevent excessive force. There was really no particular group that was particularly adamant in disagreeing with this. You only had one person out of everyone surveyed who actually disagreed that this would happen. Results for age versus body-worn cameras preventing false accusations was, again, very similar. Most agreed that they could. Age doesn't seem to play a big part in this. I believe there's, again, maybe 1 or 2 people who actually disagreed in the entire survey. and it results saying age versus requiring body-worn cameras. That is, the government passing legislation that require their use showed that most people did not want government involvement. 76% of people wanted the individual agencies to be able to choose whether to offer these cameras or not. 12 people, or 24%, said the government should require all the agencies to use these cameras. Age didn't seem to play a big part in this. And the final one is age versus body-worn cameras having adverse effects. So yeah, it's generally consistent in that body-worn cameras are seen as a good thing, and there's no difference. Age didn't have that big an impact on it, on how one saw them. The public just generally, regardless of their age, supports the use of body-worn cameras, and the main adverse effect that could have is violation of rights, specifically the violation of your right to privacy. A small number agreed that could happen. Overall, 8% agreed, and 2% strongly agreed that this could happen. That's 5 people out of 50. Okay, policy recommendations. Based on the data collected from the survey, along with how the public perceives the use of these cameras, law enforcement agencies should heavily consider acquiring body-worn cameras. They're likely to find a lot of support from the public in doing so, and regardless of whether they actually prevent these types of incidences from happening, they act as evidence in clearing an officer of wrongdoing or in proving that he did do wrong. And it is something that law enforcement agencies would likely find very valuable. Rules and regulations should be created regarding how these cameras are used and implemented. It's likely to find some case concerning them is likely to find its way to the Supreme Court at some point in time, and people's rights should be respected. State-level legislation providing funding for the acquirement of body-worn cameras should be drafted and hopefully passed. There's a lot of smaller agencies that may not be able to afford all the cameras they would need for their officers, so the funding in the state, grants, stuff like that would be an enormous help to these departments. And legislation mandating the adoption of these cameras should be heavily discouraged, especially at federal or state level. Local might be a little different. That wasn't really looked into, but there seemed to be a lot of hesitation in having the government mandate anything involving these cameras. The data showed that most people just preferred that agencies be able to decide whether they want to implement them or not. And a bill in Texas authorizing $10 million for a grant has already been created. That was in 2018, and kind of shows that the state is paying attention to the potential that these cameras have, and hopefully will continue to do so in the future. Thank you for your time.